basically it's understanding and clarifying what is going to inspire others to join me with my ideas. Is anyone else really hot? I think there's a fan over there. Somebody wouldn't mind turning the dial on. So we develop structures and strategies to do our work together, and how will we achieve our goals? And that's what organising is. By organising, we can cover all of those bases. So it's about enabling others, and I can't stress how important that is, because you see in a lot of, especially business organisations, not the most successful ones I might add, where it's very hierarchical, people have no power. You know, the housemaid in the hotel can't give you an extra pillow without checking with the boss. You know, very hierarchical. The best and most successful businesses and organisations really have distributed leadership. So in many forms it takes, but this is the one that's been defined as the best for community organising. So what we need to do is look at what are our resources, what do we bring to the party. Is it too cold?
Yeah.
Maybe turn it down a bit. I'm finding it very stuffy.
It's humid, yeah.
It is humid, isn't it? I don't like humid.
No.
That's why I moved to southern Victoria.
You must follow Jeremy.
Exactly. So, organisation is leadership that enables people to turn their resources, the resources that we have combined, into the power that we need to make the changes that we want. So it's very important when you're looking amongst a group of people to identify what the resources are. So some people will say, I'm really good at note-taking, I'm really good at public speaking, I'm really good on the telephone. But often people will need to be led to something maybe they're interested in, but they feel nervous about, and that's leadership. It's helping those people develop those skills. So we need to organise around thinking about us as powerful, because people power is about the only thing that's ever changed big movements in the world. So people have power. So we also have to look outside of our group. Who else has power? And you might say a local businessman, a local politician, a local school teacher, somebody who has influence in your community. So that's also a very useful exercise, is pulling back or pulling in some of that external power. So an organisation needs to have clear goals, and clear goals need to be very specific. So not, we want an independent for Flinders sometime, we want an independent for Flinders now. We want it now for the next election. So very specific time and needs. It needs to be concrete and achievable. So we want Australia to be run by the Whoopsie Party. Well, that's probably never going to happen. So these are unachievable goals. So goals need to be achievable. They might be big and they might be hard, but they need to be achievable. Then we mobilise our resources to get that change. So what we're going to have a little breakout session now, and pick a person to work with, and somebody you don't know is always really good. So we're going to work out who are our people. So who are the people in the Independent Flinders movement? And I don't mean names, I mean local residents, this group, that group. Who are the people that we can pull into our organisation? So we need to identify people. And I'm calling groups people because they're all people. And who has the power? So this can be our power or their power. So you might identify a group and say, well, they're a pretty powerful group, but they're probably more their power, not our power. So
I don't understand that. Who's their power?
So let's say I'm going to pick a group like the local Liberal Party.
Yep.
They're pretty powerful
Right.
around here. So they have power. So I might identify who has the power is the local Liberal Party branch, but that's their power, not our power. And they're never going to give us that power, and we're never going to be able to take that power.
Right.
So, maybe I'm wrong, but that's probably the case. But there's so many local organisations, and it's really good to try and think broad and wide about this. A few years ago, EV ran a series of 8 training sessions on identifying power in your community, and it was so enlightening because it made us all think outside the box, because there are many little pockets of power everywhere. So maybe the local badminton club has some power, I don't know, but that kind of thing. Well, there you go. So what are our interests? So interests might be, we want an independent for Flinders. Our other interests might be, I don't want any independent, I want one that shares my values. You know, so our interests and their interests. So if you identify a group and you might say they have the power, what are their interests? So for the local Liberal Party branch, they want a Liberal person in government. That's a really simple one. And what resources do we have? So resources can be people, the best and biggest resource. It can be things and connections. So do you want to take a minute, grab a piece of paper and a pen and jot down some notes? And then I'm going to ask you to work with a partner to help stimulate some ideas. So, paper, pen.
I'm happy to read a third, only because if it's specifically Flinders, I don't.
Oh, you know, that's okay. Yeah.
Can I just ask with connections?
Yep.
Well, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, yeah. So our resources might be, as independent for Flinders, our connection might be to a building that we can get for free. It might be access to, you know, somebody who's going to, you know, I don't know, somebody might lend us their car to put a banner on, but they're not actually part of the movement.
Okay,
Do you
so there's some
understand?
things.
Things, but also things
For
that,
people.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, you might, like, someone might know people who enjoy public speaking, who might come
Exactly.
and choose public
Yeah.
speaking about
Yeah.
what you want them to speak about.
So jot down a few notes and then find a partner, share some ideas, stimulate each other's brains.
Alison, do you want to follow over here and do it with me? Because you're in Dunkley, aren't you?
Oh, I was going to pinch
Yes,
you.
she is.
Oh.
And we can all learn from each other. So
Well, we've never done all.
do what you can. So Hilda or Robyn, want to call out what you've gone through?
Oh, that's not what you can.
So the people would be the existing people on the database,
Yeah.
and other people that would be potential people that hopefully would join the database of people that are in existing climate or environment interest groups.
Climate environment groups, good one. Okay. Anything else?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Henka or I don't know your name. Sorry, remind me. Kitty. Kitty.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember. Either of you two want to tell me what you came up with?
Well, we mentioned the climate thing too, and I was just asking Hank, because I'm new to this whole sort of area and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And Hank was mentioning Friends of Mount Martha, Berg,
Yeah. I'm
Sunshine
just going to
Valley.
try and write this down. Friends groups in general. Berg.
Sunshine Gully, Beach Cleanup, just environmental climate action people. Where are they? How can we get more on board? What can we do to get more on board?
Clean up groups, because there's quite a few on the peninsula, because we're not really, even though we're the Mount Martha Mornington Huddle, this is more of a general thing in our movement. So a lot of people come up with environment groups. Did you go through any of the other stuff?
No, but we were just kind of talking about how do we, Robyn, have you got any ideas? How do we get more of these groups into our sort of situation?
We are going to get to that. I'm going to talk to you about great ways of bringing people into your group. And it works across all sorts of groups. So we'll get to that. Enid, you two?
Joe did the.
Well, we looked at community groups, of course.
Look, can you give me an example?
Let's just say a ratepayers association. Yeah,
Ratepayers?
that would be an
That's a
example.
good one.
I know that the what do I call them, Central Committee, have a whole list of Facebook type groups that they have, and I think that probably the step there would be identify what's important to them and where they stand, and maybe do specific messages to those groups. They are doing a lot of posting too.
Yeah, and what would you say is a specific kind of group as a Facebook group? Like regional? Because I know every village has their own grapevine kind of
Oh,
thing.
yeah, those, but there's also a bunch of Facebook groups. I think they have about 30 of them listed that are different groups from one form or the other.
Yep.
So,
So you mean like special interest groups?
yeah, some of them are special interest groups, some of them are just Facebook pages, group Facebook pages that people have joined up with.
Right, okay, all right.
And then with business groups, we also had listed, and we said that basically they would be more a them organization. A them.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think that one of the things that we talked about was what's in it for them.
Yep.
And if we identify business groups, we'd have to think, why would they want to do this, and then tell them.
Yep.
And then, of course, in interest, we did the, the climate, the homelessness, all those kind of groups that are around the peninsula.
So social justice groups?
Social justice, that's a
Is that
good way to do it, yeah.
So, a couple of years ago, this is an exercise in don't rule people out. We were asked to contact a local group that holds a lot of power, and we would initially think of as the other side of politics, as Environment Victoria, to ask them if they would read a document that we produced on people's attitudes towards gas. I got selected for me, the Vineyards, I don't know how to say that, Association of Mornington Peninsula, which are the people who grow grapes, make wine, and promote the peninsula as that kind of thing. When I finally got on to the president, she was very about it, put it to her committee, and I got 2 people who contacted me and said they'd be very interested because they are worried about climate because bushfires spoils their grapes.
And a lot of rain.
Yeah, so they are interested in these issues. It's just sometimes they're scared of the deliverer of the message. But that's easily overcomable because I had a lot of training on how to do that. Anyone else? Kathleen?
So, where are we? Okay, just the power.
Oh, anything you
Oh,
come up
okay.
with.
All right. Well, we said that we've got the power because the people, our power is dissatisfied people, dissatisfied with the status quo. We've got commitment and energy.
Is it double S for disappointed?
Yes.
Dissatisfied.
Don't worry.
Double P, sorry.
Don't worry, that's fine. That's fine, we know what you're saying.
Okay, so their power is the Liberal Party, for instance, and local government, a lot of power there.
Yeah.
Interests, various issues are our interests.
Yeah.
Once again, their interest is power. Resources. Okay, so we've got people, we've got letter writers like Hank, who's got a letter in the local paper today. Again.
Go on here, Hank.
So things are newspapers that we can,
Yeah.
Facebook.
Yeah.
So our connections, neighbours, Berg, friends groups, social justice group that I wrote down here.
Brilliant.
So,
There was just one thing that I had in our group, as far as interest, was Indigenous issues.
yes.
People.
Yep.
And the fastest growing demographic on the peninsula under 50 are Indigenous
Really?
people.
Really?
Their birth rate is going up and ours going down.
Oh, don't tell Doug.
No, well, exactly.
Well, do tell
But
them.
they're very proud of that, and that
Yeah.
came from, the CEO of Will Moraine. So he said that their birth rate on the peninsula of Indigenous folk is going up while ours is going down because, it's an ageing population in the white field. And also, we have the largest group of Indigenous people in any LGA across Victoria,
How interesting.
which is also great. So I think
It's
that,
great.
and they love their country. They want to look after it. So they are very big supporters of anything to do with climate or social justice. And I'm sure that they would agree that both of the parties have done them wrong and not supported them. So yes, I think that's a really good thing to think about. And it's hard nut to crack, but it's worthwhile thinking about that.
Can I just make a comment about the business points? I'm a member of Berg, and
Yeah.
they've got a whole list of sponsors in the local community. So if we get them involved, then do we automatically also get their sponsors involved?
Not automatically.
Not
No.
automatically, but we can.
We could, yeah,
You could know
target
who
them.
their sponsors are, and
yeah.
we could approach them.
Yeah, because clearly
individually.
they have the same value system.
My experience is Berg love what they do, but they're very conservative and they don't like change. They wouldn't even support the community garden here because it wasn't native. So they're very conservative in what they support, what information they give. But if you're a member of Berg and you can see who those sponsors are, you know already that they are potentially on our side.
What's Berg stand for?
Falcon Estuary Restoration Group. So it's a local group. There's a river down there called the Falcon Estuary, and they restore that. They restore all sorts of bushland. They're a huge group. They've got lots of money and quite a bit of power locally. So they're like a friends group, but
Well, they do all the work that the council doesn't.
exactly
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
And they do great work. Great work. Okay, so anyone else have anything to add to this?
Culture or faith groups
Cultural and faith
and sports.
faith, culture. Can you give me an example what you mean by that?
Oh, well, the old Italian club or something like that, the Hungarian club, I remember.
Yep.
The early days in Victoria. And faith groups as in
Churches.
or churches.
Spiritual groups.
Yeah, exactly.
It was actually, just quickly, coincidental that Alison's here because yesterday I got a phone call from Dunkley about starting a Voices on Dunkley group and whether I'd help them set it
And
up.
Alison's the new president.
And Alison's in Dunkley. But she's...
That's why she's here today, to see, to sort of like work on an independent in every
Yeah.
electorate in Australia.
No, in Dunkley. They're seriously...
We'll start with
you know,
Dunkley.
Dunkley.
Thanks.
That's great news.
I have a lot of faith in your abilities, Alison.
Yeah.
Okay, so now what we're going to talk about is distributed leadership, and there's a couple of bits of plastic floating around with, which are much better. Did you have a chance to look at that? So I've done a very bad drawing on the board of what it means. I hope you can focus on that. So the little dots represent people, and the arrows represent, they're all meant to be two-sided arrows, two-ended arrows. Because in a distributed leadership model, power, resources, friendship, communication, it's all a two-way street. You'll see that most of them are in groups of 5. I kind of ran out of steam to do all the groups of 5. So we have a core leadership team, and we'll talk about what that means, and that's sort of what Hilda's doing. I don't know, is anyone else here on the core team? No. And then we have a local teams. So Environment Victoria uses this as their kind of business model, and they have community organisers. So I'm one of those, and there's many community organisers all over the state. So as community organisers, we are kind of at this point here, and we interact with all of our people and with the core team as well. So it's really to make sure that the core team is not overwhelmed, but everybody's saying, what time do I go to what's the name tomorrow? So that's kind of what the community organisers do, is run the groups locally. They focus on local issues and the core team supports them. So issues that we might have in this area will not necessarily be the same that they may have in Hastings. So our strategy and our overall plans will be the same, but the way we implement those may be different. So this is called distributed leadership, or the snowflake model, and you can see why. So no one person or group holds all the power. So the idea is to push the power out. So when Marshall Gann's team was doing the Obama election, they made sure that all the little community groups had a lot of power to decide what they were going to do in their community. So if you're in a poor black neighbourhood in New York, you would have a completely different process than a rich area in California or something. So you would have a different process, you'd have different, the goal was the same, but how you get there is different. So the core team works on the overall strategy and gives that to the local teams, which then test it in the marketplace. So they may say, look, that might be great up there, but it's not going to work here. and vice versa. So really, the core team is about developing and refining strategy, and the local teams are about delivering it on the ground. So all teams are interconnected. So you can see here that this person has a connection, double-headed arrow, to every other person. So everybody's connected, but we don't work in big blobs because it's very unmanageable. So responsibility is shared, and that creates mutual responsibility. So in our little group, we might say, okay, it's your responsibility to make the tea. And when she doesn't, we all go, where's the tea? We hold each other accountable and responsible for what we said our jobs are.
How many hubs are there?
At the moment?
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say you could give an example. So if that's the core team,
Yep.
and this might be an independent performance group or an Environment Victoria group.
Yeah, so this is I know the Environment Victoria model, so that's...
Then you might have another snowflake coming down here,
Yep,
which is
yep.
your...
Well, I'm going to get to that, yeah.
Berg or, there's a connection that they do their thing.
Yeah.
But in actual huddles, how many are there? You've got the
Five.
Five.
So I'll get to why we do that.
Okay,
So,
I just want to know how many.
Yeah, exactly. And so decision making is decentralised. So the core team may come down and say, okay, we're all going to go and hand out flyers at markets. And I might say, well, Mount Martha doesn't have a market, so that's not going to work for us. Why don't we do handing out in the street, which is something that we've done a few times. Sarah and I have done that. And that works in this little area. So, I mean, that was a bad example, but, there are things that work in some areas that don't work in others. So, that's why decision making is done in the local teams, that kind of decision making. So the core leadership ensures whole organisation is moving in the same direction to get an independent for Flinders and toward the long-term goals. So the core team looks at things like selecting the candidate, that kind of stuff that too many people would spoil the process. So you allow people to take the power that they have and they can run with, and they do that very well, and they are left alone. They share, of course, a reciprocal sharing of information, but power is distributed. So I'm sure Hilda doesn't want to say every 5 minutes, Mornington, you should have had blue pens. Hastings, where's your green pen? Like real fine detail. That's stuff that our little groups can organise ourselves. Okay, core leadership develops strategy, which is the important part of any campaign, while local leadership teams test that strategy on the ground. Local leadership teams keep things flexible and delivering on the short-term goals. So perhaps the core team might say, okay, we want 1,000 brochures handed out in the next 3 weeks. Please don't say that, but they might. And then we take that and we say, okay, well, give us 300, we'll do 300. And then within ourselves, we organise how we're going to do that. Maybe you're in charge of letterboxes and get yourself a team. You're in charge of handing out the street, get yourself a team. That we might decide that as a small core group, like a small local group. So the overall strategy is delivered by the core team, but it's enacted by the local team, and how they do it can vary. Sorry if my voice is shaky. I've done about 6 Zoom meetings.
This morning?
Already this morning. This week. I'm doing one with Chinese groups, so I have to have an interpreter, so that's going to be so interesting. At the end of the day, when I'm really tired, I'm like, wow. So, it's been researched that we can, in this kind of work, only manage about 5 key relationships, which is why if you work on a committee of 15, nothing ever happens. And you might have great friends in that committee, but as far as getting action done, 5 people, which is why you can see, and I haven't done it, you've got to imagine that this just goes on and on. 5 people. So, the reason for that is that part of building an organisation is relationship building, and we'll get to that in a minute. So, we need mutual accountability. So the arrows point both ways, because I'm accountable to Sarah and she's accountable to me. If I say I'm going to do something, she not hassles me, but she does to get that done. Or anyone can have a responsibility that they've accepted. So part of it, remember I talked about it creating leadership. So if, for example, Joe says, I'm quite interested in making phone calls, but I don't feel very confident, then we organise some sort of training for Joe. We find somebody with those skills to help us in doing that effectively. So that's developing our leadership and making everything a two-way street. So there's not one person who knows everything, but there are many people with little sort of core skills that we can pull on. So team members are accountable to each other and mutually agree on tasks and expect results from and provide support to each other. So there's both of those sides. We have to work with clearly defined roles so there's no confusion. And when you work in a team of 5, that's much easier to do. So we also, when you look at this, as Alison said before, this has potential for exponential growth. And in the Obama campaigns, that's one thing that they did. They had amazing exponential growth because these people don't have to develop these people. These people develop the core person in that team, and that's basically how it works. So you're not expecting everybody to do everything, everybody to know everything, but as you work in smaller and smaller groups of 5, you can spread easily. Okay, so it's exponential growth, and that's exactly what happens in a lot of these organisations, the successful ones anyway. So now we're going to get on to organising practices, and this is where we get to the nitty-gritty of how to do it. Thank you. Does anyone need a drink? Tea, coffee, Bonox, anything? Thanks, Mum. Okay, so there's 5 key practices. I keep thinking you've got your hand up.
Oh.
5 key practices of organising, which I'll write on the board because I like to write things down. The first one that came up was very interesting because when I first heard it, I thought, oh, who's got time for that rubbish? But part of the course that I did, there was a very large group of Indigenous people who ran some very hefty organisations and had worked in unions based in areas where it's predominantly Indigenous people in the union. So they, as soon as we did this session at the training, they all said, we already do that. And so they actually took over and led that training course, which was amazing. So telling stories. And it doesn't mean telling porkies. It has to mean authentic stories where you have lived experience, not this happened to my friend or I heard about that in another state or something. This has to be your personal experience. Building relationships. So like I said, when I first heard this, I thought, oh, who's got time for that? I just want to go, Alison, go do that. You know, and that is not distributed leadership. So building relationships. So I think it was Gandhi who said, when I introduce somebody to my movement, it's for a lifetime. And what that kind of breakdown means is that this might be independent for Flinders. Let's say when we get our independent elected, there's still more work to be done. We have to support that independent. We have to make sure they get in next time. So we have still ongoing lifetime work. And you might identify yourself as somebody who's interested in homelessness, and I might be interested in homelessness. So we can go off and work on that together in some other group. So building these relationships is for life, and you will find on the other side of politics, they're really good at doing that, the old boys club. Once you're a friend from school, you know, you can move around job for life and that sort of thing.
Really excellent stuff.
Yeah. And then you go and work in corporate. Structuring teams. And strategizing. This pen's about to go.
Is this one
I don't think it's no, it's not a thing.
is that really see that down there?
You can't? Okay, I'm going to read it out. You can write it down if you like. So it's telling stories, building relationships, structuring teams, strategizing and acting. Now we're just going to do the first couple, and I'm really whizzing through this stuff because it's 2 hours as opposed to 3 days. So, why we use stories. The main reason I find is that values, by telling you a story, I'm telling you my values. And values inspire action, which is what we're really looking for, but through emotion. So if I say to you, oh, there's a fire over there, want to come and help me put it out? You'd be like, no thanks. If I said, my children are in the house and my dog's going to burn to death, please come and help me, you would go and help because I've invoked emotion. Okay? So telling stories is about creating emotion, sharing your values, and that's where you get action. Okay, so, and this is why telling stories is telling why we care, why are we here, why are we doing this, what matters to us, and what do we value most. So stories communicate and engage and connect and motivate. So like with the fire example, motivation is pretty obvious, connection is pretty obvious, we're going to work on saving these children, and we engage together on that. So they can be used to recruit. So when you're talking to somebody at, say, a market or something, tell me what led you here today. So what brought you to this meeting today? Go ahead, tell me.
I just wanted to listen to the subject, to the content of, this process, basically.
Okay, so community engagement and things is something important to you. So what groups do you work in where you could use this?
Rosebud. The Rosebud Huddle.
Okay, the Rosebud Huddle, awesome, that's great. All right, so we've connected. Oh, I know somebody who lives in that area. Do you know Hilda?
No, I never met her.
Yeah, you need to meet her. She's awesome. So then, we build on the connections that we can find. So telling stories. I once went to a workshop with Hilda and she really contributed a lot to that workshop, and I remember some of the things that she said. So, it's great that you've got already a connection with her, so I just ignored you there, so you're not. But, you find a story that you can relate to. Okay. So what we're going to do is have a little breakout. Oh, by the way, telling stories is called public narrative. So if you ever read that in textbooks, that's what they're talking about, is telling stories. So we ran through probably 6 hours of telling stories, and that's when the Indigenous people said, we already do that. They do it in a much slower way, but there's a little process to go through. So we're going to have a little breakout again. Pick somebody else to work with, but first of all, I want you to take a couple of minutes to think of a story. So, pick up. I'm trying to speak to him in Dutch, but I can't speak Dutch. So we're going to talk about public narrative. If you want to learn more about the art of this, which is a very important skill. This is not me saying it, this is a very successful campaigner saying it. We use public narrative to communicate, to engage, connect and motivate. So, it was pointed out to me that not everybody wants to talk to people about their values. Nobody necessarily wants to have public narrative. And we have agreed to disagree because I feel that it helps everyone to come up with very specific points, because remember I said to you, if you say, you're talking to somebody you don't know very well and they say, what did you do? Oh, I went to this workshop about community organising, and they'll go, because they don't know what you're talking about and they will care less. But if you say, oh, I went along to learn about my values and to be able to express my values, and you are able to then do that. Like I thought about the time that the house was burning and the kids were in it, and I ran over and helped get the kids out. But I wouldn't have done that if I didn't know there were kids inside. Or whatever your story is, it's emotional. So what we're trying to do is engage. We communicate, we engage, and we make a connection with people. So when you're talking to people in the independent Flinders movement or out, and this works with friends and everything as well. I'm sure we've all got the friends who like this, and they don't listen to you, they don't care about you, they don't even ask about you. Well, I certainly do know lots of people like that. Not really friends, but people I know. So if we as humans can learn to relate to people through that emotional connection, it makes a much deeper, more permanent connection. So really, public narrative and telling stories and hearing stories is communicating. So what are we communicating when we're talking about this sort of stuff, do you think? We're communicating our favourite fashion or our favourite meal? What are we trying to communicate? Anyone?
Well, something about ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's very personal.
And would that be values? Could be. Yeah, could be values, could be very personal experience, a trauma or something. And we're trying to communicate and motivate. So we're trying to bring people into our movement, and if we're going to grow, we have to do this. So values inspire action through emotion. So our stories need to be emotive. So not just I went to the shop and bought a loaf of bread. They really, I went to the shop and I bought a loaf of bread and I saw this guy hit by a car and I had to help him and there was blood everywhere and blah, 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 blah. Whatever your story is, it has to have emotion attached to it. So is there anyone who'd like to share a story they had or they heard? Or I will point you out and make you do it.
No, Kitty's got one.
I've got
Go
one,
ahead.
yeah. I think I mentioned the other day at the coffee thing, our second daughter has Down syndrome and the NDIS has been fabulous, and I guess until you've experienced disability you might have very different views on the NDIS and it's a waste of money and bankrupting the country, whatever, but it's not, and it changes huge, not just that person's life but the whole family and even the society. It's just really, really brilliant. So I think, look, we're grateful, but I think also both sides, Labor and Liberal, have been disappointing in some respects, and there's been overspending and then there's been reduction in funds and all of that. And look, maybe an independent is the way to go in Holland. That, and I know that Monique Ryan is the member for, she's on the Joint Standing Committee for the NDIS. And yeah, I mentioned we went to the parliamentary side, we told our grievances or our concerns and how it took nearly 2 years to get our daughter into fantastic accommodation, which she now has and loves and is thriving. So that's all a really good positive story, because you hear some real horror stories.
Yeah.
But I'm just a bit loath to blame one side of politics over the other. And look, with respect, Robyn, but earlier you sort of said, oh, the Liberal parties and, it's jobs for the boys, they've got a job for life. I'd just be very careful about speaking in that way, because you are pitting people and parties against each other. And in a world where we're trying to be more tolerant and respectful of everyone, I think, I'm not a Liberal voter by the way, but I just think that kind of demonising and generalising it's actually not correct either. Not everyone who's in the Liberal Party ends up with a great career and a great job and a job for life.
Can I quickly respond to that? Because one of the things about the independent movement, particularly the community independent movement, which is basically voices of, like Cathy McGowan's movement that started in 2011, one of the most important things for us is to be our best selves. So if we're out and about with an Independent for Flinders t-shirt on, we can't bag Liberal or Labor or Animal Justice or Greens, because we have to be our best selves. So what we're trying to sell, if it's selling, it's not really selling, but what we're trying to promote is that politics can be done differently. And politics doesn't have to be about bagging one side or the other.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm agreeing with you, but I'm actually saying as independents, we shouldn't be saying the Liberals are blah, 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 or the Labor's this. We can say the party system is broken because we think corporate donors or fossil fuel companies or whatever are, that's broken, but we can't actually bag, for example, we're taping this, we can't bag Zoe McKenzie or Chris Crowther or Sam Bloch or even Paul Mercurio, because that's not being our best selves.
And also, we're being as prejudiced as the people that we are criticising.
Exactly.
So,
That's what they do all the time.
Yeah, so what I try to say is you come to an issue with an open mind and a kind heart.
Correct.
And if you do that, you can have a dialogue with Evie, because I was also a volunteer during the last state election. Wonderful conversations with the Liberal candidates, because you have to listen. There you go. Sorry, Paul,
Okay,
you want
duly noted, and I think I would pick where I said that, but I think what I was trying to demonstrate is that, and it's not just me saying this, but there's one side of politics who are really well organised, they're really well funded, they've got really great systems in place, and then there's the other side of politics, which is a loose spattering of groups that are trying to pull together to have a common purpose. And I guess that's what really I was trying to articulate. So I've duly noted that, and I will not say anything like that again.
And I think this, and to add to what these two people were saying, it's probably quite important how we present ourselves as an organisation, rather than alternative three. This one or that one, probably feeds into defeating ourselves in that process. getting an organisation that's really interested and engaged with community and getting, community values looked at and heard and policy ideas developed becomes the primary focus of the organisation. And then, of course, as the community gets engaged in that process, as a policy group, policy development group, whatever you want to call it, then a representative surely to come out of that, rather than out there punching away for an independent member, when really what we're not wanting so much, we're wanting good policy.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to be focused on, I think.
And so you're saying we go to the existing parties to ask for that, or we...
Hell no.
No, right.
Because they are doing it through their own machinery. We want to do it through the community, don't we?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the whole basis of our movement.
Exactly.
And it's
We
happening
need
all
to
around
name
Australia.
it and talk about it in that way, though.
That's right.
Rather than just focusing on independent for Flinders, because we're not actually interested in an independent for Flinders. We're interested in better policy.
But
Really, if we came together as a community, imagine this: if we came together as a community and developed policy, and we had the kids at school, we had all these different groups contributing and engaging, and we were all getting very literate about what policy ideas. We wouldn't care whether it was a Liberal or a Labor.
I think maybe Paul needs to run a workshop on developing policy.
But Paul, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, that these, if whatever her name is that represents us at the moment,
Zoe McKenzie.
Zoe, I mean, if she could represent those ideas that the community had to the Parliament and get them addressed, then we'd be happy with that, wouldn't we?
Absolutely. In fact, if you actually survey, which we did last time for the last federal election, we actually talked to a lot of people about the type of representation they wanted, and it's exactly what you're saying. It was a representative who listens to the public, who listens and takes their concerns to Parliament. Now, based on how the two big party machines work, they are often representing their party's position, not their community's position. So we're saying now that the vehicle in which you get your concerns, your community's concerns, heard in federal Parliament is via a community independent. We're saying we've tried with Liberal, we've tried with Labor, we've tried with the Greens, that they don't actually...
That's an idea that I wouldn't push so much in
the
beginning. I think it'd be an idea that that would come on the back of getting the community strongly involved with policy development ideas.
I'm hearing you now, and that's sorry.
Sorry, one little point. I think time has proven that the Liberal-Labor thing didn't really work, hence the birth of the independent. That's what I think. And like you said, Sarah, someone like Zoe McKenzie could be great, take our concerns back to the Liberal Party, and I think, Robyn, you mentioned this, that then, no, you've got to play it by this game. You get shut down when you're part of a big machine.
But the interesting thing is it Paul or Paul?
Yeah, still Paul.
I've got when you walked in, I wasn't sure if it was Peter or Paul, or Mary. No, Paul. I have a document from 1970 that someone brought to a kitchen table conversation. It was the Labor Party had done what the equivalent of kitchen table conversations. They had talked to their community. They had a document which is very similar to the one I wrote back 3 years ago but it was substantial. So the Labor Party at one point in time did listen to their community.
Look, Rudd did a big community thing. Remember, he brought people together from all groups. Hundreds of people, Rudd.
That's right. So, but with corporate donors, with fossil fuels, we're seeing it now. We feel like that's, but we need.
The more members of the community know what you know that because you're engaged.
Yes.
What we're trying to be is engaged as a community, and drawing more people into engaging in that process.
Yes.
That I think ultimately will get our independence.
I think you're right, and that's what we try. I think you're right.
And I think that's where the focus ought to be more, and just keep that sort of. I mean, the independent thing. Obviously we've put something up, but it's about the organisation calling itself something that the community wants to engage with, because they can start to have their own attitudes and values and policy ideas.
Yes, so it's like having their voice heard. We started Voices of the Mornington Peninsula back in 2021. I'll finish in a second. And our job was not to get a candidate. Our job originally was to encourage participatory democracy, so get people involved in exactly what you're saying. So, but now we have an election in 5 months. So it's the longest period, 5 months till May. If we want a candidate, we're going to have to fast forward some of this stuff but hopefully, since the Voices started that conversation in 2021, hopefully there's been conversations. I did a kitchen table conversations with 100 people back in 2021. So it's not 80,000, but it's still starting that conversation that you're talking about.
Could Hilda perhaps address what strategies or what, I don't know, what things we're asking of our candidate, what kind of values, what policy. And this is the thing about when I was saying this goes on forever. If we get a candidate, we get them elected, they're going to need help and advice on policy. What does our community want? So is there any work being done so far on that?
On the primary things that this group is asking for is climate to the issues to be addressed climate, homelessness and integrity. They're the fundamental three.
There are a lot more issues than climate change. And I'm going to go back to immigration. It's going to be a big, big political issue.
Yeah.
All right? The problem is nobody understands immigration. 75% of our, I'll get off this in just a second, 75% of our net overseas migration are temporary visas of people that have to leave again. Okay? Our bank thing now is saying the reason we have inflation is because of tourists. Well, let's get rid of them. Let's get rid of, the students. They only contribute billions of dollars. So there are a lot more issues than the ones that are dear to us that are going to come out. And I am developing policies for that, by the way.
Fabulous. And I think that there's a time and a place.
This is about why this group would be important as an education process to understand these things more and see how you might talk about something like immigration that I currently don't think impacts it on me at all.
No, it doesn't.
But then, well, I think it does. And through a bit of education about how that feeds into the broader network of political processes, it does come back and impact on us, and we just need to.
Okay, so maybe there's another.
I just wanted to say too, I think with some of these words, and phrases like climate change and immigration, it's really important to define what you actually mean by that, because I think different pictures are in different people's heads when we talk about the word climate change. That could mean a lot of different things underneath. One
thing that we should thank Dutton for with his new website Against Independence and Advance Australia, whatever they're called these days, is they have laid out the best case for an independent ever. By saying that the independents only vote with us 12% of the time and they only vote with Labour 7% of the time. That is exactly what an independent does. So they have given us all the ammunition we need. They've done it. They've said, this is why you should vote for an independent. These two ultra-conservative people. I wanted to get that in, but now I'm done.
Paul, can I just ask, are you in the Mornington Huddle? Are you in our huddle, or where do you live?
Yeah, I am, but I haven't been around.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Can you write down on a bit of paper your email address, because I want to put you into a policy forming group. How would you like to do that? Would you like to be in a policy group?
Yes, you might have to wait until after Christmas.
Doesn't matter.
Yes.
So just make sure you write down your email. I haven't met you before, I don't think, and just put your email on there.
Yes, you have.
Where have I met you?
Continue, or
I've been
shall we stop now and talk?
No, we need to continue. Yes.
Sure?
Yes.
Okay. So I wanted Kitty to expand on her public narrative, because I feel like she's got a really powerful story to tell. So if I was just a random in the street and Kitty was talking to me because maybe we're neighbours or we're at this checkout together or something, And I said, oh, what did you do this morning? This is a great chance for you to talk your public narrative. Well, I'm getting involved in a local movement for change. Oh, what's that mean? Well, I have a disabled child. And then you can tell a story about the change the NDIS has made for them. So the NDIS is fabulous. Okay, it's cost a lot of money, but so do nuclear subs, you know. And, you know, I would love to hear more about a story that, like, maybe she was in this really bad accommodation, something, you know, bad, then good. You know, that kind of emotion. I think you could tell a really powerful story, and not what committee went on and stuff like that, because people, that's not emotional. Do you know what I mean?
But it does, I guess, highlight the, I'm not on a committee, but we went to the parliamentary inquiry, and that highlights our level of passion, my husband and my level of passion. Because a lot of people kind of, what can you do? Well, we're real doers. We're like, right, screw this, we're off. Yeah.
Good, yeah, and you could use that at the end to say this is such an important issue that we went off to that committee to hear them speak, because it's such an important issue.
Well, to tell our story.
Exactly.
That's what we did. Yeah.
So what story did you tell? Was it a long story or a short one?
Medium.
Okay.
It was just
like 10 minutes or an
Yeah,
hour.
get 5 minutes.
Probably 10 minutes, and the main thing was to do with the funding. To do with the funding and how much you have to fight for.
Yes.
And, you know, we're intelligent, educated, articulate people, and we really struggled, so God help the rest of the community.
Yeah. So public narrative is very important. So this is not me saying it, this is the movement. This is Marshall Gans saying if we want to grow a movement, we have to get good at this. So the other thing that we need to talk about is building relationships. So relationships are for life, not for a week or a month. So the relationships you build in this organisation we're going to need for a long time. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So the idea, relationships are rooted in shared values. Very often you don't have a strong relationship with someone who's completely different to you in your values. Most people that we have friendships with and relationships with, we have shared values. Maybe not all values, but maybe some core values we have similar. So power that we're trying to generate comes from our commitment to work together to achieve common purpose, and commitment is developed through relationships. So if you know somebody really well, so Sarah rings me up at Wednesday night and says, I've got stuff going on Thursday morning, I really need help. And I'll probably drop a few things to go and help her. A stranger in the street says, I've got stuff going on Thursday morning, can you come and help? I'd probably go, well, no, I've already got another commitment. So that relationship is what causes the commitment to happen. So the more strong your relationships are, and you don't have to make a relationship with every person in this group, but if you use this model, it's 5 key relationships. So it's much more manageable. And so we're rooted in shared values, we're long-term, and we're created by mutual commitment. So I'm going to commit what time I have, you're going to commit what time you have, because we have a relationship. So, and it requires consistent attention and work. And I think Sarah's very good at this. I'm not so good at this. So building that kind of like continual contacting of people, you know, and it seems time consuming, and Sarah does it on a level of 200 people. That's why I think I can manage 5 key relationships, you know, it's much easier. So it's constant contact, and not all the time, but, you know, keeping in contact with that person about what's going on for you. And that will gain work and commitment from people.
Just to clarify, I can do it with 200 people only by delegating. Like, I delegate a lot, like just then to Paul. I mean, I do a lot of delegating, and I trust people to get that done.
Yes, that's true. So we need structured
I have no
teams.
I have no friends.
Sure, Sarah. Working in teams is critical to successful campaigns. So no organisation has ever done anything where I do my own thing, Hilda does her own thing, Sarah does her own thing. We work in teams. Teams are what give people power. And you can see that many other organisations do this really well. And I've been involved slightly with an environmental group that's been going for a long time, but they have a very hierarchical approach. So they will contact me and ask me to do that. They'll contact my co-worker in this organisation and ask them to do something different. And we don't know what each other's doing. And then we chat and we're like, what? So that to me is very bad organisational structure. So working in teams so that each of us always know, because we've got double arrows, what's going on. Okay. Structured teams, and we have to have explicit norms, and norms is a new word for me, but it's more about, it's rules but not as strong as rules. So norms are things like, when I go to a meeting, I like to talk, I need to be quiet, listen to other people. And if I'm a quiet person, I need to force myself to speak and contribute. That's for you, Uncle Aki. So norms might be always respectful. Don't talk when the speaker's talking. Or whatever norms your organisation wants to come up with, it's very important to have those. Raise your hand when you want to ask a question. Being on time, yeah, all of those.
Starting and finishing.
Exactly. So we need. I better check the time.
You got 15. I didn't
15
that
minutes.
wasn't
That's okay.
that wasn't there, but that's usually a thing.
Okay. So strategy and acting is the fourth and the fifth, which I'm not even going to talk about today because that's another whole subject on its own. But we're basically in a campaign, there are stages. So I've written this a bit small. I don't know if you can read it. So it's an arrow. So foundation stage of any strategy. Then you have kick-off. Woohoo, can't wait for that. Then you have lows. Then you have highs. And as you go along, so I'm thinking of the Yes campaign. So a high was the number of people who volunteered on the peninsula. That really was a high for all of us, and we celebrated that. A low might have been when somebody got abused at a booth or something like that. So there's highs, there's lows, there's highs, there's lows, and you have to expect those. And that's when we pull together as a team and we motivate and keep each other, in strength. So then we reach the peak, which would be, in this organisation, the election of a candidate independent. And then of course there's usually a bit of a slump afterwards, and then there's the resolution, which is hopefully again a rise. So this is the mapping of a standard campaign in all sorts of fields. So if we are at the foundation stage, because we don't have a candidate yet, then this is the longest stage, so you can see that goes for a long time. And that's what we've been doing, is building community and building interest. So we create capacity, and capacity, remember, each of us is responsible for generating leadership in each other. So Irene, for example, says that she's not good at speaking at markets and things like that, but she's volunteered to help me on a project doing sort of background work. So we're identifying strengths in each other, and it's my responsibility to not push Irene beyond her limits, but to encourage her to do things that maybe she's a bit about. And that might be giving them training, it might be referring them to somebody else who can help them. There's all sorts of things that you can do, but the idea of community work and powerful community work is to create leadership in each other. Okay. So this period can last weeks, months, or years. So if you think of the civil rights movement, it was years in its foundation just to get, black people to vote. It was a really long period. Ours is not going to be like that, but some movements can be. So we need clear goals and shared purpose. And I think we have shared purpose, maybe, maybe not, but I think we have clear goals and interdependent. So not independent, but interdependent. So our roles need to complement each other and not be conflicting with each other. And that's something that comes out of the core leadership group. So basically strategy is turning what you have, your resources, into what you need, which is your power and your tactics, and your capacity to get what you want, which is your goal. So that's what our strategy is going to be, but that's, as I said, another whole subject. So that's a topic for designing a campaign, where we flick into action when we get to this point. So we're in our foundation stage. What we should be doing is developing and prioritising relationship building through developing our stories with each other, understanding each other. So if you've talked to somebody you don't know in the room today, you've probably learned something about them that perhaps you didn't know before, and that can give you a shared relationship. So this is the crucial stage of leadership development. And here ended the lecture. Anyone have any questions?
Can I speak just for 2 minutes about the foundation period that we've had? Would you mind?
Go ahead.
I understand that there's Because we think of the foundation period as starting when Independent for Flinders started, but I want to really talk, because many of you in the room were part of this with me, I know Enid was. In 2020, 15 people met on my deck and we started the Voices of the Mornington Peninsula. So that was in 2020, and that was very soon after, I saw a book just there, here it is. Cathy McGowan had a conference called Getting Elected in 2020. And I went to that, and so did a bloke called Michael Stevens. And Michael Stevens contacted me soon after that. So I'm actually going to trying to tell you that the foundation period has actually been going for 4 years. Because soon after Voices started, many of you were involved with Voices. And although it no longer exists, a lot of the foundation work was done during Voices. Many of you were involved. And then after the election, 2022, and I'm going to be very blunt, it was a shit show for us. We had 2 independents, and we just mucked it up, okay? So the day after the election, I thought, right, we've got to start rebuilding. What's the first thing we need? We need to bring all these warring parties together. So Despy supporters, Sarah supporters, but I also realised Labor and Greens were fighting as well, so I bring Labor and Greens together, animal justice, so progressives got together. So the progressive movement started. Build your independent movement under the banner of the progressives of the peninsula because you're too left-wing. So, and Independent for Flinders was born. Hilda was at the meeting and Anne was at the meeting, where we sat and we thought, right, we're going to rebuild Independent for Flinders because Voices of Mornington Peninsula has disbanded, so we're going to start building this new organisation. So I'm just basically saying this foundation period has been really 4 years, and we've got a really good chance this time. If we can build the base, which we've been doing for the last, 5 months, Silver? 5 months we've been building a base. We're all working to the same goal. There's been, as there are, what is it, norm, storm, form? There's not a bit of that, but basically we're all trying to get to a position where we get a candidate announced and we all get behind that person and we can collaboratively get a community independent for Flinders. Wouldn't that be fantastic?
Oh yeah, but I did 3 long intensive days and I've had to narrow it down to less than 2 hours. So there's lots I've missed out, lots I've skimmed over. So I apologise if there's great big blanks, but time doesn't permit us to go any deeper.
I mean, certainly I got a lot out of the brainstorming piece about thinking about what do I want to achieve. Like we've heard some stories about what's important to people, what motivates you to get up and stand up and do something. Who are the people who can help me? Who are the people who are not going to help me but I might need to have some relationship with?
Yeah.
And who are the key people who will help me achieve those things, and what are their, how do we work together and agree how we support each other to actually get something done?
Yeah, and that's relationship building, is looking at shared values and sort of semi-ignoring your non-shared values. I'm doing some work in the Sikh community at the moment about environment, and it was made very clear to me right at the beginning, we don't support any of this LGBTQI plus rubbish, it's all bullshit. And I thought, wow, why don't you say it how you think it? But it was a bit confronting for me because I support all people. Like if you're a good person, you're a good person. If you're not, you're not. And I found that very confronting, and I was coached through this, which is another whole thing that Evie does very well, about finding your share values. You don't have to agree on everything when you work in a campaign together. And I thought that's very true, because I'm never going to find somebody who agrees with me on everything, which is good because it makes me rethink sometimes. So I think you have to decide, maybe I don't get on so well with somebody, but what are our shared values? What can we work on together? What do we agree on? So that's part of the public narrative, is to bring that out.
The thing I think that an important point to this is what the organising committee does and how they do it and how they interact with their groups.
Yeah.
And that a lot of that is a matter of trust, is what that boils down to.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I see that as something that needs to be very clear
Yeah.
how that works.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's like, I mean, I look after a little 5-year-old sometimes, and her mum doesn't trust her to do anything.
Mm.
So she's 5, and she's at my place. She chops vegetables unsupervised. She runs her own bath because she can, and I think why not? And there's a lot of, I mean, I did it as a kid, and I didn't die, so obviously it's okay. But you know, it's trusting that people will make mistakes, and we'll just pick them up afterwards, and we'll move on, and we'll learn from that, and we'll try again. And I think you're absolutely right. Trust is very important in these relationships. So trusting in people's hearts as well, like trusting that they're on the same page as us, and they're not evil, they're not trying to bring anything down, they just maybe approach things differently, but we have to trust.
In the next email that you inevitably send out, could you make it clear who's on the organising committee? Because I'm not sure.
They sign.
There are 5 people on the organising committee.
Perfect
What would you
number.
like to know?
Who are they? Who are the
Let's
five?
write
Me, Pam, Debbie, Jared and Luke.
So what I asked them to do is put their surnames on the newsletter so people know who they
And a
are.
bit about
They are on the newsletter.
Yeah, they are now.
You get a
Yeah.
newsletter from...
I do, but does it state that you're the organising committee?
Yes. At the end
Do
of
you
the
get
news,
it?
at the end of the
Who writes the
newsletter,
newsletter?
it always says, put those 5 names down.
Okay.
At the end of the
And
newsletter.
the important
one,
thing
the
is
second one
that
is
you
chairs
can
with
contact the
driver
organising
chairs
committee. It's
and
not like
find
they're sitting up there on thrones and they have other people reading what comes in. No, contact
They are very
us.
contactable.
No,
the
it's
newsletters,
open.
can each of them, whichever newsletter's coming out, can you talk a bit about yourselves and what?
That's a good idea.
So we get a
Oh,
feel
public
of you. I
narrative.
don't know all those other people.
Okay.
I just met you, but
Yeah,
We'll work on that.
I think it's important.
I think that sometimes I don't know how yeah just
I
the rest
find-
of
I
it.
find that
Just one of the
important.
whole things is
What are
no
the rest of the names?
I have to learn to listen because that's the big thing, you know,
And
that we're representing, you know.
So I'd
So
like to know.
it's listening rather than telling you who I am or what I am. I'm here to listen
That's
to
all I can
you.
tell you.
And because that's then about how the candidate is chosen, about what you want. You know, so
I think the story of you know, I'd like to know the person.
There you go, little public.
I think that when it comes to the candidate, that's
It's not only surnames, but then their mobile
I think
numbers.
that's very important.
So their
I'm just
contact
foolishly because
okay. What would you? Okay, you asked me questions about me. I'm one of the 5. Only
yeah,
one of the
but what
5.
I'm saying is in the newsletter that everyone gets, not just us, but everyone gets. It'd be nice to
Just maybe your vision. I mean, I know you're helping us to select somebody, but you know, what drew you into that?
yeah.
Because that's definitely something we can use
Yeah.
when we're trying to recruit people, to say like, our leadership team consists of Hilda,
Yeah.
who's, you know, had lots of experience with Blip and knows a lot about so-and-so.
And people are going to ask me, well, who's behind all this?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do you think that the organising committee is important if we're really taking your lead and then putting that together and displaying that?
Yes, definitely, very much.
People are very suspicious these days, this is what
Yeah.
I
It's
think.
not
Who's behind all
suspicious.
this?
No, it's not about being suspicious. It's about being informed, and maybe when we do find out more about you, we're like, oh yes, great, I'm so glad that person's on the committee.
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
what's
I
wrong
know,
with
I know
this?
why I've
What's
never
wrong
read
with
who the
disclosure?
organising committee is, because I can never get to the end of the newsletter.
Oh, why is that?
It's too long, too wordy.
Okay.
I made a suggestion about that.
I'm just going to pull us back. It's 12:30, and that was good feedback for Hilda. But I think really I might turn the camera off now, and I think it's time to thank Robyn very much for. No, really, it was terrific. So thanks to Robyn and.